Autonomous vehicle ethics is all about the trolley problem. Truth or myth? This one's a myth. The trolley problem is the last thing we should be worried about when we're concerned with the ethics of deploying autonomous vehicles on public roads. To understand this, let's first talk about the trolley problem. Given a no-win situation, should the vehicle kill one person to save 5? Some people would say, well, yeah, you have fewer people dying. But other folks are concerned that if that means making an intentional decision to kill one person, maybe that's not okay. What about if you decide you're going to kill socially devalued people? Does that mean that you need to wear a suit when you're walking on public roads as a pedestrian to make sure the autonomous vehicles kill someone else instead of you? This turns out to be a false dilemma. It's not the question we should be really worried about. Here's an example from a popular online site that has people explore this. In this particular scenario, we have a car with nobody on it, so it's an autonomous vehicle with no passengers, and it has a choice of killing 2 homeless people who are walking against a red light or killing the 2 business people who are walking with a green light. And it turns out the homeless people have to meet in this path, but the question isn't, should you switch paths or not? The question is, should you kill the homeless people or should you kill the business people? Really, how often will this happen? And how does the car know that some folks are homeless? What if it's a person carrying a briefcase as protective camouflage? I mean, who knows? It's just a ridiculous question to ask in a practical sense as opposed to a theoretical, philosophical sense. And beyond that, why was this car running around on roads without redundant brakes? If it actually had brake failure, there's some really serious engineering design problems going on, and that car should not have been on the road in the first place. So it's an unrealistic scenario. And why didn't the car, there's no passengers in it, why didn't it hit one of the side barriers to roll itself over and take away its motive power if it lost brakes? Again, there's nobody in the car, it could do that. So this is a setup of a false dilemma. It may be interesting and useful to understand the variations of cultural norms of what lives are valued more than others and what situations are valued more than others. For that, it's fine. But it's not actionable and not relevant to autonomous vehicles anytime in the near future. It's going to be a very long time, if ever, before the number of fatalities in these no-win situations has anything to do with the overall fatality rate on roads. Or if it is, then that means they haven't been engineered safely in the first place. This is not the question to ask. So what is the question to ask? The number one problem in ethics of autonomous vehicles is deployment governance. Who decides when to deploy based on what? That's the question we should be worried about. You have aggressive for-profit deployments. These companies are in business to make money. Now that's okay, especially in the US. We love having businesses in business to make money, and that's okay. The question is, do they do external harm? Are they well behaved? Are they doing the right thing socially while they're trying to make their money? The issue here is they have existential financial and time pressure. This technology takes a long time to deploy. Promises have been consistently made over years that it'll be done sooner than it really is. All the companies end up under time pressure. They have to get out there and get their robots moving on public roads, possibly before they really should be doing that for safety reasons. Add to that, there's missing independent technical oversight. The US government has taken a non-regulatory approach, that's their words, and so the companies are pretty much on the honor system to be doing the right thing, at least until a crash happens, and then the regulators move in after the fact. If these companies want to do ethical deployment, they should be addressing the following at least. They should be publicly disclosing how safe they plan to be so they can be measured against whether they meet their safety objective. I did not say the government has to set a bound on exactly what that is. I just said that they should call their shot. They should say, here's our plan, here's our expectation for safety, here's our metrics, go ahead and measure us to see if we're doing what we said we did. There should be an inclusion of stakeholder concerns. All the vulnerable road users should have some way of influencing whether these vehicles go on the road in response to the risks that they're being put at by the public road testing. There should be transparency of data and processes. Right now, the industry keeps everything secret they possibly can. They say it's all trade secrets and proprietary, but when you dig down, what you find is some of the times what's really happening is they're not being forthcoming about the risks they're imposing on other road users. And also accountability for any losses. At some point, a loss will happen. That's inevitable. And roads are not perfectly safe places, so maybe it's okay for there to be the occasional loss. But the company should be held accountable and should not have a way of deflecting accountability due to favorable regulatory approaches. There are some concerns on equity as well. Ride-hailing with human drivers made a lot of promises with disappointing results. The promises were made, and it really hasn't turned out that way. In fact, some of the reasons why people really want robotaxis are because the ride-hail companies didn't deliver. For example, disabled folks say the ride-hail drivers will have troubles picking them up. They don't want them as riders, and robots clearly will pick them up. Well, why should we believe that for-profit robots will actually turn out differently? You can make the argument, but the same arguments were made with ride-hail. That didn't work out. So we don't really know how this is going to turn out with robot drivers either. There are labor concerns. There's concerns about displaced ride-hail and taxi drivers. There's concerns about displaced truckers. And this technology will take a long time to mature. So I think that any concerns about instant unemployment for the entire class of drivers are not going to come to pass right away. But certainly there are concerns there that need to be addressed. There are also transportation access concerns. Will the disabled really get service in the absence of regulations requiring, for example, common carrier type rules to serve all folks? And there's an issue that cheap taxis can pull traffic away from public transit, which is safer. So even if robotaxis are just as safe as human-driven vehicles, the fact that they're putting more people in taxis instead of on trains and buses can reasonably be expected to cause a net reduction in traffic safety by switching to less safe modes. There's also risk distribution concerns, that testing risk might be imposed on a vulnerable population unless there are rules limiting that. And there's a municipal preemption clause in most cities with this testing, which says that the local government cannot control issues that happen, and that needs to be addressed. The takeaway here is that the ethics and equity question we should be worried about is who decides what, when, and where to deploy. The trolley problem is not the thing we should be spending our time worrying about.